5 years have passed since a comet collided with Earth, wiping out over 75% of the population. The air is polluted by radiation. Earthquakes and electromagnetic storms occur frequently, forcing people to live in shelters. John lives with his family in a shelter in Greenland. He is an engineer and scout who often has to wear protective gear to go out and inspect the environment. One day, he discovers cracks in the ground growing larger. On the beach, he finds a crashed ship. Inside, he collects some tools and discovers the remains of the entire crew along with a notebook containing drawings of beautiful flowers. Just then, John receives a warning about an electromagnetic storm and runs back to the shelter just in time. After disinfection, he is still in shock from nearly losing his life and seeks medical help. The doctor advises him to open up to his family instead of hiding his emotions. Meanwhile, his wife, Allison, attends a meeting of shelter leaders about the depletion of resources. Dr. Amina shares her discovery of a crater in southern France that could potentially become a safe area to live in. However, the area is in the midst of a European civil war. An earthquake shakes the shelter. Leaders notice an increase in earthquake frequency and debate whether to rescue those sending distress signals. After a vote, they decide to send a sled out the next day. Later, Allison discovers their son, Nathan, has sneaked out and scolds him. Worried about his health and fearing he might end up like John, who often coughs badly after each reconnaissance mission. At dinner, John gives Allison a flower he found on the ship. When Nathan confesses to sneaking out, John becomes angry and his son leaves the table. That evening, John and Allison try to relax by dancing, but Allison remains worried about her husband's coughing. In Nathan's room, he uses a flashlight to create star shapes on the ceiling, imagining he's gazing at the sky outside. The next day, John found several cracks in the bunker walls. Meanwhile, the snowmobile went out and rescued a group of survivors. On the way back, the rescue team called the shelter to request permission for a second trip because they had to leave some people behind due to insufficient space on the vehicle. Adam immediately objected, reminding everyone that they lacked space and resources. Just then, another earthquake struck the area, and they lost contact with the snowmobile. The shelter shook more violently than usual, causing people and furniture to fall. Suddenly, several points on the ceiling began to collapse in several rooms. Some debris fell on John's head, and the dust and smoke worsened his cough. But a friend came to help him escape the building. The alarm sounded as the shelter shook again, and an explosion could be heard nearby. John rushed to the office to rescue Allison, who was also hit by falling debris, and together they went to look for their son. They found him in the room wearing a mask. John told the family to pack as much as possible while he went to find more masks so they could leave. Everyone was panicking and running around the cellar, but John managed to reach the cupboard and return with some masks, which immediately made Nathan feel better. So the family started looking for a way out as the tremors continued. The walls were also starting to crumble. A desperate crowd gathered at the exit, which was only partially open. They wouldn't be able to get out through that door. So John directed the family to the tunnel on the east side. John told the family to crawl under the rubble. He pressed a button to open it, and the powerful engine caused the room to begin collapsing even faster. The whole family ran as fast as they could and got out to safety. Survivors were running everywhere while geysers began shooting up. The couple lost sight of Nathan and ran back to find him helping a fallen Amina. The family took her with them as they ran toward the beach where survivors were climbing into boats to try and escape. The crowd was so dense that one of the boats capsized, sending the crowd tumbling into the water. Some desperate survivors seized the opportunity to try and steal Adam's mask. So Allison and John rushed to help him. A man jumped at John and tried to snatch his mask before he and Allison managed to pull Adam to shore. Only one boat remained, so John quickly guided the family and some survivors onto it. Allison wanted to take as many people as possible, but the boatman pointed out that too much weight would cause the boat to sink. So they had no choice but to close the doors in front of everyone. The survivors outside clung to the boat until it took off. Just then, a huge wave appeared and crashed onto the beach, killing all the survivors who hadn't managed to escape. John's boat was also battered by the waves, but luckily the boatman managed to get through and they continued their journey safely. A few minutes later, John used a device to confirm that the air quality was good enough that they could remove their masks. The group then discussed where to go, and since Iceland had disappeared, they agreed that the nearest destination was England. A few hours later, the boat stopped working. John checked the engine and tried to fix it so they could continue their journey. As night fell, Nathan was overjoyed to finally see the stars. A few days later, the boat stopped again due to running out of fuel. The group had no choice but to share their rations and let the sea carry them to an unknown destination. After a long wait, the boat finally washed ashore. The group looked out and were surprised to find they were in Liverpool. John used his device to confirm the fresh air and said they should find shelter. But looking down, they realized that part of the area was flooded. John grabbed an oar and began rowing until the boat reached a dry road. The group disembarked and found the town looked deserted. They saw a few people on the street and followed them until they found a dilapidated settlement where locals were struggling to survive. John noticed that many of them looked sickly and wouldn't last long out there. John's group heard shouting and followed the sounds until they came across a crowd protesting outside a shelter guarded by soldiers. Adam rushed to the gate and explained that his men were government officials from the Greenland station and that he was requesting urgent asylum. The soldiers asked to see their badges. But only Allison had one, so she was the only one allowed in. Adam started arguing with the soldiers as the crowd became increasingly agitated. And one soldier shot Adam dead. The soldiers closed the gates as the air raid sirens began to blare. Just then, a storm appeared in the sky, and the crowd fled in panic. Amina and John's family ran to stop a truck and asked Obi to take them to London. Obi wanted payment, so he let them in. After taking John's watch, the truck sped out of town, narrowly avoiding the storm. Allison hugged Nathan to comfort him while Amina grieved over Adam's death. Obi explained that people were desperate and would kill for food. A few hours later, the truck stopped in the woods to rest. Obi smoked a cigarette and shared that he had come to England from Nigeria 12 years earlier but had no regrets. John asked if he knew anything about the situation in France. But Obi said the area was too dangerous and thought the story about the crater was false. Suddenly they heard a rumbling sound and discovered some comet debris falling from the sky. Everyone frantically clung to a tree just before the flying debris whizzed past their heads. The wind swirled fiercely, but the group held on tight to avoid being blown away. Obi said the truck was all he had and ran to try and save it. However, debris began to fall to the ground, and one of them killed Obi and destroyed the truck in the process. After the shower of debris ended, Amina and her family gathered their bags and any useful items they could find in the truck and continued their journey on foot. Finally, they arrived in London and knocked on the door of a very large building. A hole opened and Merkanji pointed a gun at them, but she immediately put down her gun when she saw her old friends and let them in. She then led them on a tour, revealing that the building was a nursing home, and all the survivors there were elderly. Merkanji explained that she had tried to seal off the area and that the generator was still keeping the air filtration system running. The group relaxed with some food and drinks for dinner. John asked about the crater, and Merkanji said she had heard rumors but didn't know if they were true. Screams and gunshots could be heard in the streets, and Merkanji confirmed that London was no longer safe. Late that night, Allison tried to sleep, but she kept hearing John coughing in the bathroom. Looking into the sink, she discovered blood. John tried to insist it was just a normal nosebleed, but Allison didn't believe him. So John revealed his secret. A doctor in the bunker had told him that the bleeding was a symptom, meaning he only had 6 to 8 weeks to live. Allison was devastated and wanted to stay at the nursing home to spend John's final days peacefully with his family. However, John refused to die there and instead wanted to find a new home for his family, so he could rest in peace. The next day, Merkanji gave them one of the many abandoned cars from the nursing home and a gun for self-defense. After Merkanji hugged them one last time, Amina and John's family left. A few hours later, while crossing the countryside, John noticed Nathan looked sad and suggested playing games along the way. Suddenly, a bullet shattered the car window and struck Amina, killing her instantly. Several men in the bushes fired continuously at them, being careful not to hit the engine because they wanted to steal the car. John immediately took a position behind the car and began firing back, killing each robber one by one as they got closer. When only one remained, John ran out of ammunition, but luckily Allison had a second gun and shot the last one dead before he could harm them. After spending a moment comforting each other, the family dug a hole and buried Amina. John recited a few prayers as a final farewell, and Nathan was curious about the prayers, which sounded like they were wishing them well when the person was actually dead. Hours later, the family arrived at a vast desert area and realized this was what remained of the sea. At least this meant they wouldn't need a boat. As the journey continued, they saw numerous ships and containers on the ground, including an intact Spanish galleon. A few miles later, they found the road blocked by a series of cars and survivors standing motionless. It turned out there was a huge chasm between England and France, only crossable by walking across an extremely dangerous rope bridge. Nathan was terrified and said he couldn't do it, so John went ahead to set an example. The whole family began to walk across the rope very slowly and carefully. When John coughed, he nearly slipped but quickly regained his balance. Suddenly, a very strong gust of wind began to blow, pushing the bridge and forcing everyone to hold on tighter to avoid falling. Fortunately, the wind quickly subsided, and the family was able to continue their journey until they reached a rock formation in the middle of a chasm. 2 ladders connected the rock to the other side of the chasm. While the family was resting, an earthquake struck the area, but luckily no one fell. The trio climbed the ladder and began to crawl. However, they had to stop and hold on tight when the earthquake struck again. Rocks fell from the walls of the abyss, and soon the rope bridge snapped, causing many to fall to their deaths. Nathan had grabbed the edge of the ladder, and his parents helped him climb back up. The rest of the rock was also collapsing, so the family quickly climbed up and eventually reached France safely. Now the journey continued on foot. However, no matter how far they walked, they only saw a desolate wasteland. Suddenly they heard a gunshot and saw Dennis pointing a gun at them. He lowered his gun when he realized they weren't robbers and offered to take them home. A few minutes later, the group arrived in northern France. Dennis was living in an old factory where he got electricity from a car engine, which in turn was powered by solar panels. He introduced them to his daughter, Camille, and his wife, who was mute and confined to a wheelchair due to radiation affecting her nervous system. During dinner, Dennis learned that John's family was trying to reach the crater and warned them that the area was extremely dangerous. Only 2 cities remained, and people were fighting for control of the crater, including remnants of the French army. Camille took Nathan into her room and showed him all the cool things Dennis had collected from the other buildings. In return, Nathan showed her his star-studded bedsheet. The next morning, Dennis gave John a map and pointed to the least dangerous route. He also shared the name of a friend in the army and gave John an old photo so they could prove they knew him, hopefully helping them get help. Suddenly, Dennis broke down in tears, begging John to take Camille along. He wished he could take her to the volcano himself, but he had to stay behind to care for his wife. John hesitated, but Allison agreed. Camille then tearfully said goodbye to her parents and left with John's family in Dennis's truck. After a few hours of driving, Allison noticed the children were in a bad mood and decided to stop so they could rest. John started a game of, "What would you choose?" which improved everyone's mood. Suddenly, several vehicles appeared on the road, and a group of soldiers surrounded them. Camille mentioned the name of her father's military friend and convinced the soldiers to help them get through the area. As night fell, the group arrived at a battle zone where the army was fighting rebels. A soldier guided them behind the front lines so they could sneak through the forest undetected. They had to stop moving when something exploded near them, but then they continued on and crossed a barbed wire fence to reach an even more dangerous area. Now they had to run as fast as they could to avoid the bullets and explosions happening all around. Their guide called back to the command bunker to report that he was leading civilians, and his comrades told him to keep moving while they provided cover. The group continued forward and eventually reached the trenches where John nearly collapsed from coughing. Eventually they reached a ladder and the guide led them out into the woods, telling them to keep going straight until they found a camp. By morning the group finally found the military settlement. Camille noticed some mountains that hadn't been there before and John concluded they must have come close to a volcano. When they asked a soldier about Dennis's friend, they discovered he was dead. The other soldiers didn't want to help them, so John told them he was dying and only wanted to protect his family. A man took pity on them and arranged a place for them on the bus. John's family and a few other survivors set off on the bus that would take them to the crater. However, the journey was interrupted when something exploded on the road. Suddenly, the bus was surrounded by rebels. So, a soldier went out to fight them, but he was immediately shot. Then a rebel also killed the driver and forced all the refugees off the bus. John pushed his family out but stayed behind to confront the rebel and started fighting. Another armed man wanted to help his comrade, but a refugee used a rock to hit him in the head and take him down. Inside the bus, 2 gunshots rang out. John emerged victorious with a gun but also revealed that he had been shot. Everyone got back on the bus, and Nathan kept pressing on John's wound while Allison drove. A few minutes later, they reached the summit of a new mountain, and the family helped John hike until they found the crater. The rumors turned out to be true. The crater was a beautiful place with fertile, unpolluted land, perfect for starting the reconstruction effort. Just then, John collapsed, and the family surrounded him to say their final goodbyes before he closed his eyes. Everyone wept as Nathan repeated prayers as a farewell to his father. The movie ends here. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.